I want to thank you all for being here today at our 4th annual Donald H. Ogilvie Colloquium. Before we even get started, I'm going to invite those of you who are coming in, and even those of you who are sitting in the very back, to just, I'm going to be like Family Feud, come on down. I just dated myself. But please feel free to move down towards the front. We're blessed to be in such a wonderful room, but it's a big room, so we want to make sure that everyone here can access and hear everything, all of the wonderful things that we're about to talk about today. My name is Ebony Jackson. I am the Assistant Dean for the Office of Inclusion and Diversity here at the Yale School of Management. And I also serve as co-chair for CARE, which is the Council on Anti-Racism and Equity. And so we are excited to have a wonderful event this afternoon, and we're excited to be here in community with all of you. As I start every event, I'm going to start off with our land acknowledgement, and then I'm going to introduce our wonderful MC and our moderator for the afternoon. Okay. So Yale University acknowledges that Indigenous peoples and nations, including the Mohegan, the Mashantucket, Pequot, the Eastern Pequot, the Sagatuck, Golden Hill Bagosset, Niantic, and the Quinnipiac and other Algonquian-speaking peoples have stewarded through generations the lands and waterways of what is now the state of Connecticut. We honor and respect the enduring relationships that exist between these peoples and nations and this land. All right. So I'm going to tell you guys very quickly a little bit about CARE, and then we're going to get to the good stuff because you do not want to hear me speak. This is our 4th annual colloquium. Yeah, you can clap it up for that. Yes. And 4 years is a good time for us to reflect on just about anything. What I do want to do is give honor to the folks that are responsible for us being here today. Unfortunately, Dean Kerwin Charles, who is an ardent supporter of this event, is not able to be here today. This is the first one that he's missed. So I want to give honor to him. Even though he's not in the room, he is here with us in spirit. Yes. All right. But there have been a myriad of folks who have been on the council and supported its efforts for the last 4 years. And so I would like to take some time for anyone who has ever been on the CARE Council, including my existing council members. I see a few of y'all over here. They have really done a lot of great work that's leading up to this moment today, and so I would like to honor them and recognize them. If you've ever been on CARE, please stand. Yep. Thank you. Thank you. And so CARE was born out of 2020, which was a tumultuous year and a year that kind of changed everything. And there are many, many initiatives that we've worked on, one of which is this event right here. The CARE Council wanted to create a high-impact speaker series that was able to feature alumni, community folks, right, to talk about the things that we thought were important for our community to talk about, right? To really help us as a community to move ourselves forward when we talked about equity, when we talked about inclusion, when we talked about the type of place that we know, right, as alumni, SOM is, and what we want it to be. And so this speaker series was born. Today we have a wonderful, wonderful panel who are going to help us along on that journey. Along that note, I do need to mention today that unfortunately, we had booked Lindsay Green, who was class of 11, to come and be one of our speakers today, but she was unable to be here through unforeseen circumstances, so she's not able to join us, but we do have a wonderful panel of folks, and we're going to keep it moving. I am going to introduce our moderator and MC for the afternoon, who is Stephanie Mehta. Before I even get to Stephanie, I need to thank Lee Race from Alumni Relations, because she is the one who introduced us, as Stephanie is responsible for her being here. Yes, thank you, Lee. So Stephanie is a very humble person and asked me not to read this entire bio, but I am going to just let you know that she is the CEO and Chief Content Officers of Mansueto Ventures, which is the parent company of Fast Company and Inc. magazines. She was most recently editor-in-chief at Fast Company, and she was working on the editorial side of Vanity Fair, Fortune magazine, Bloomberg, and the Wall Street Journal. She's done a myriad of events, and she serves on a myriad of boards, one of my favorite organizations, the Women's Forum of New York, as well as the American Society of Magazine Editors, Airbell Impact Lab, and we are very, very lucky to have her because she is a Connecticut resident, and so she didn't have to come very far to see us today. So please clap it up for Stephanie Mehta.
Thank you so much, Dean Jackson. And thank you all for welcoming me here to the CARE Colloquium. I'm really honored to have been invited to moderate this next session. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speakers. As Dean Jackson said, come on down if you feel so moved, because I'm going to ask a couple of questions, but then we really do want to open this up for a conversation. The spirit of community is one that we want to bring into this room, and we're really looking forward to hearing from each and every one of you as we move through the conversation. Our first speaker, I feel like he does not need an introduction, because based on just the few minutes that we have been sitting here in the front row, so many people have come by. He seems like he's the informal mayor of the School of Management. Erik Clemons is the founding CEO and president of the Connecticut Center for Arts and Technology and the Connecticut Community Revitalization Program. I am going to let Erik tell us a little bit more about what those programs are as part of our conversation. Come on up. But especially relevant to our conversation is Erik's extensive background in organizational leadership and development, and his dedication to supporting Black, Brown, and low-income communities throughout the state of Connecticut, which has led to sweeping changes and real outcomes in the lives of countless young people and early career individuals. So welcome, Erik.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you. Our other panelist, come on up, is Ron Coleman. He is a social impact and leader. Before he began his career doing what I can only describe as the Lord's work, he was a middle school math teacher. And he later held leadership roles at Teach for America. A round of applause for middle school math teacher. I mean, my goodness. And he led the expansion of Grow Your Own initiative, which is focused on statewide educator recruitment and retention. So again, doing really important work to help educate the next generation of young people here in Connecticut and beyond. He is going to earn his MBA from the Yale School of Management this month. And after graduation, he's going to begin a new career in commercial consulting at Deloitte through its New York City office, also the Lord's work, I think. Ron and Erik, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie.
To ground our conversation, since we are here at Yale School of Management during Alumni Weekend, I would love to hear from both of you about why Yale. And Erik, you are actually, you are a guest lecturer here at the School of Management, but you are also getting your master's at the Yale School of Divinity.
Yes. Finished my first year.
Woo! Ron, let me start with you. You're about to graduate. You can reflect on your time here. Why did you pick Yale?
I picked Yale first and foremost because I grew up here. I've seen both sides of the opportunity gap here in New Haven. What I mean by that is growing up, my mom, my grandmother were both educators. here in the city of New Haven at Southern Connecticut State University. Education for me was paramount. It was what I did after school. It's obviously what I did in school and what I cared about. That and sports really gave me a foundation and a belief in myself. Today, I like to call that goal tracking and progress, all the things that I do to know that I'm moving in the right direction. But I grew up, they sacrificed so that I could go to private school, right up the street. That upbringing was all I knew. And I didn't know the sacrifice that took and the belief that my parents had in education and what it would do for myself and what it would do for my brother and what it would do for the Coleman family legacy. We'd like to talk about legacy and impact later if we have time. But why Yale? Because after undergraduate studies, I pursued an early career in Teach for America, and TFA brought me back to New Haven. And so 2.5 miles across town, I saw what it was like to not go to a small, prestigious private school with all the resources, all the headaches. I mean, there's headaches in any school system, but all the headaches hidden from children. And we really just got to be kids, but we got to immerse ourselves in learning. We had all the opportunities in the world. And when I was teaching, I realized this is completely different. And it's a systemic thing. Many of the kids I looked at and said, you're way smarter than I was when I was in school. But the amount of homework I'm doing, looking around, and the amount of time I have to think is completely different. And so that started getting me to think about systems, like why is it like this? And so as my career progressed, I saw Yale as this critical bridge, and it came to me. And I don't think it's the same way for everyone, but I got connected with the Yale New Haven Teachers Institute. I got connected with good folks at Dwight Hall, folks that operate out of the Yale New Haven Affairs office. And that was kind of my first bridge into like this support as a struggling educator, this support as someone that wants the world for the kids in my classroom, but I'm emptying my bank account, either traveling because I need a break or buying things for the classroom because we don't have anything we need. And so later on, through all the things that I've done, I decided that in order to grow the organization that I had started here, myself and a few other TFA grads, we really needed to understand business. We needed to build a bigger network. And Yale, potentially through, even if it's just the education here at SOM, and meeting great classmates who have been helping out tutoring across the city all year and even last year, I decided that Yale could be that institution. And so for me, it wasn't HBS, Yale, CBS, or wherever I can get into. It was I'm only applying to Yale, and if I don't get in, I'm gonna go to night school at UConn or somewhere else. And so fortunately, this worked out. This has been an incredible experience. Some of my faculty mentors are here today and who have seen potential in me. And again, that's this whole process here. And we'll talk about that with impact. It's seeing potential in people who others might see it, but aren't able to help out. And so, yeah, Yale's just going to continue to be a bridge. And it's been a great experience for me.
Erik, what do you see at SOM when you are participating as a guest lecturer? What makes this place special to you?
Great question. First, I want to thank you all and thank Dean Ebony, Doc Ebony and Zanaya Leon and others who put this together. For people to come here on a Friday after work and it's 80 degrees and sunny outside, it means a lot to me. That you are wanting to listen to what we have to say. So thank you all for being here, and thank you, Doc Ebony and CARE and all the other folks who are involved in this. This is fantastic. For me, I lecture in Teresa Shaheen's class on social entrepreneurship, as well as Kate Cooney's class, and I also co-facilitate interpersonal dynamics with Heidi Brooks. And so first, I wouldn't be doing that if it weren't for those people. It's really, to me, it's not about, and this is no knock against Yale University, it is not about being at the university or whatever the university could afford me. It was really some really incredible people who I love and respect, who are doing great work and are really community-minded, wanting me to come to their class and speak, and whatever it is that I've been able to garner through my lifetime and my experience, lend that to the students. And what I love about that work, and quite frankly, even at the Divinity School, being a student, is I always meet a critical mass of students here at SOM especially, who are really trying to figure things out, really trying to really contribute to the world in a way that they thought they could or they dreamed about, and really do not know how to do it and have the courage to say, I have no idea what I'm going to do next. I'm looking for a job. I'm trying to do this and trying to do that. And I just absolutely love and respect that. And so every year that I either lecture or even facilitate IPD, I meet these incredible students who make time to come talk with me, not only about what their next move is in their careers, but also about life. And so that, to me, I believe, whatever it is that I'm doing right now is a calling, and I know that because, most often I have no idea what I'm doing when I do it. And that, because of that fact, anything that I've done well, I had no idea what I was doing beforehand. And so when I'm able to cultivate authentic relationship with total strangers who are not even from New Haven, know nothing about New Haven other than the time they've been here, and they trust me enough to share their life with me, that to me is real teaching and lecturing. So that's not about Yale. I think Yale is the vessel by which I can cultivate relationships like that, but it is not me thinking about Yale in a way that I think most people may think about Yale. I feel like, and this sounds pretentious, but it's not. I think Yale should be happy to have me more than I'm. I do.
And I loved what you said about calling, and we are going to come back and spend a lot of our time talking about calling and purpose. But before we do, both of these panelists are uniquely qualified to talk about the relationship between Yale and New Haven. And I would love it if you could each reflect a little bit on the ways that this institution can be a better citizen to the city of New Haven and the ways that it can collaborate better with New Haven. Ron, maybe I'll start with you.
Yeah. So I think for me, Yale can continue. I actually think Yale's been a little bit too humble. I have two sides of this, but the predominant feeling I have is that Yale has been a little bit too humble about some of the social and financial capital that it already invests in New Haven. This is my perspective from my lived experience, having seen, been on part of boards, been driving students towards work out in the community, seeing what goes on in Teresa Shaheen's class, seeing what goes on in the Inclusive Growth Fellowship, in IDEDL, the Inclusive Economic Development Lab. That's only to name a few. I believe and I've seen that the folks who are most critical of Yale, and that is not to say that Yale does not have a responsibility or an ability to do much more, because it can. But I do believe that if folks knew everything and had all of that information, it'd be more of a partnership and a collaboration with Yale to do more, and more people would actually feel empowered to support the university in that, instead of sitting across the hall shouting at the university saying do more. And so what I mean there is that's Yale's responsibility to actually come out and publicize and be more loud and proud about what goes on, because there is a lot of partnership, I believe, with the city, and there's a lot of collaboration. But I know it can do more and it should do more, but I don't think the way that it does more is just by saying what it wants to do and coming and telling the city. I think that collaboration needs to happen, and for that to be organic and that to be unique, it needs to involve the folks that are most critical, and I think the folks who are most critical don't get involved unless they already know what's going on. And so to bring that down to a more practical level, though, what I think about is the events and the one-time things that Yale might do in partnership with the city. Those need to be rethunk in a way that they're more sustainable and that the impact carries out over time. So anything that is done just once, how can we think about how that's done monthly or even quarterly to start before that? What I also think is how can Yale support some of the smaller entrepreneurs in this city, not just working in partnership with City Hall. City Hall and the headlines and the press conferences, great, change needs to be made that way. But how can we intentionally invest in smaller local entrepreneurs that are trying to make progress and know the community the best? So whether that's youth-focused organizations, whether that's access and inclusion, whether that's workforce development, I think at all levels, Yale can do a better job of partnering, not just at the top.
Erik?
I'm kind of two-sided on this because I'm not originally from New Haven. I'm from Norwalk, Connecticut, which is maybe 20 minutes south of here. And so I've lived in cities where there is no Yale, and it's very different. And so New Haven, in my opinion, has a distinct advantage because Yale University is at the center of that city. Now, that being said, I will say this. I'll say two things. One, coming to New Haven, it was very clear to me that Black people had been convinced that they should be an employee of Yale University as opposed to a student of Yale University. That is very clear to me. Secondly, I'll tell a quick anecdote. I remember building ConnCAT, which is in Science Park. And we chose to build in Science Park, and ConnCAT is a workforce development and youth development organization that's doing really incredible work, especially for folks who have been unemployed, underemployed, and mostly Black people living in Black neighborhoods here in New Haven. And we wanted to be in Science Park because it was in the midst of cutting edge technology. And it was a beautiful space that we transformed into even more beautiful space. And I recall vividly when we were ready to open and we would receive people, especially from New Hallville and Dixwell, because they were in walking distance, they were in proximity. And we would receive people who would take part in our workforce development trainings, and they were all connected to Yale New Haven Hospital because it's the second largest employer. And we opened in 4 weeks, no one came. And I ended up calling one of the alders, Alder Delphine Clyburn of New Hallville. And I talked to her about what we were endeavoring to do, especially for these two communities. And she rounded up a group of people and brought the folks over, and I gave them a tour. And we even had prayer in that space. And what I learned was people weren't coming from New Hallville and Dixwell especially, because we decided to plant our flag in Science Park. And what they ended up telling me was when the Winchester gun factory closed down, there were thousands of people who lived in New Hallville and Dixwell who lost their job. But there was a promise to those people that they would bring in another industry to replace Winchester. And so jobs would be coming back to those people. But what they ended up deciding to do, Stephanie, was built a gate, a fence around Science Park where the people who are indigenous to the community couldn't even come through Science Park anymore, and named it Science Park. And so a promise was broken to the Dixwell and New Hallville people especially. And so here we are thinking that, I was blissfully ignorant, thinking that we would becoming to help. And people thought that we were agents of Yale University because of where we decided to plant our flag. And so that has been very hard to cure for folks who are indigenous to Dixwell and New Hallville. There's still a sore spot because there have been many promises that have not been kept. But I will say, from my vantage point, given the work that I do with Yale University, and I do more than just lecture and a student, there is a more intentionality to be more in community and authentically with folks than I have ever seen in the 25 years that I have been here. And I think a lot of that has to do with the folks who are at the university giving voice to the need to connect to people who are indigenous to this city. And those folks are Talesha Shaheen, Dawn Ragsdale, who's heading up the Inclusive Growth Center, the work that ConnCAT and ConnCORP are doing, Heidi Brooks, and even Dr. Kerwin Charles now, who's been very intentional about not only, not just doing outreach, but reaching out as well. And so I think it's getting better, but I do know that, or I do believe, I don't know this to be a fact, but I do know that there should be some apologies made to a lot of Black communities, especially here in New Haven, coming from the Yale University. And I think, it's one thing to create programs and trying to create connectivity, but it's another thing to apologize first and then do those things, because that creates real relationship, because a lot of people have been hurt.
Yeah. Erik, could you explain the differences between ConnCAT and ConnCORP? We didn't do that at the beginning. Clearly, you're the founder of both organizations. One organization was not enough for you. You had to double down and found another one. So ConnCAT was founded in 2011. ConnCORP was founded in 2018. Explain what each of these do.
Yeah, so ConnCAT is Connecticut Center for Arts and Technology, is a replication of Bill Strickland's Manchester Bidwell model. And what we effectively done is stood up an organization that does relevant workforce development. Relevant being that we create trainings that are based on the needs of employers in New Haven. And so started that organization, built it for a year, became fully operational in 2012. What we did was, again, connected to Yale New Haven Hospital's needs. I was a trustee of the hospital. The hospital said they needed phlebotomists, people who draw blood, and medical billers and coders for the next 20 to 25 years. So I designed trainings based on those needs. Then created a youth development program where we used the arts as a vehicle for academic achievement. Did a very poor job, quite frankly, of addressing the issue of reentry. I had not really thought about it. And also because we really connected to Yale New Haven Hospital's needs, that the hospital really doesn't allow folks who have been incarcerated to work there. So it wasn't even on my mind, but I realized that I had made a critical error. And there are hundreds of people every day who come home to New Haven from incarceration with no skills, no job, no housing, basically nothing. And so I did feasibility and actually hired a Yale SOM student who's a dear friend of mine. Her name is Neela Powell. And Neela wrote a white paper and a feasibility report on what training we should do for folks who are incarcerated. And that training would be culinary arts. And for whatever reason, culinary arts is more forgiving to people who have been incarcerated. And so I built a culinary school for folks who, 40% of those people who would come to the culinary school were people who had been incarcerated at some point in their lives. That became wildly famous and really put us on the map nationally. And we've graduated hundreds of people, but I started thinking about what would be the next iteration of impact, given that people are walking in the world differently, with a deeper sense of hope, deeper sense of commitment to community, and deeper sense of commitment to their families because they have a job. And so got together with my board chair and another founding board member, Paul McCraven, and thought about, let's think about economic development and economic justice. Let's effectively really create an economic infrastructure in the Dixwell community that has languished in poverty for the last 60 to 70 years. And so what we did was we looked at an old strip mall on Dixwell Avenue, which is maybe a mile from here. And we started purchasing the properties on that old strip mall. I then left ConnCAT, the original organization, to build up ConnCORP, and my dear friend and colleague, Anna Blanding, said she was going to be right there, who was a Yale alum, SOM alum. She decided to come do this work with me, and so she's our inaugural chief investment officer. And so we started doing that work maybe 5 or 6 years ago in earnest, and really building the organization, because originally it was an idea, it was fraught. And so what we have done is basically purchased the entire block over the last 3 or 4 years and sat with community. So it's a community-centered design approach. We sat with community, asked them what they wanted, what they needed. They wanted housing, a place to eat with fresh food, a grocery store to buy fresh food, places to eat, the revival of arts and culture, quality early childhood, and housing. And so we've purchased 8 acres of land, which used to be the Dixwell Plaza, and we have commenced to building. And if you ride by there, you'll see the first building, the steel frame up. We're going to build a new ConnCAT headquarters with an early childhood center. We're going to build a child and family guidance center run by the Hill Health Center. 184 units of housing, retail spaces. We're bringing in a grocery store, 300-seat performing arts center, 15 restaurant food hall, 15 townhouses, greenhouses, and a 60,000 square foot office building, which will bring $1 billion to that community in the next 10 years. Thank you. And we also purchased an old elementary school, which we turned into a Black business incubator, because we realized that Black businesses, especially due to the pandemic and due to systemic racism that Ron talked about, are shuttering at a clip that no other businesses are. And so we converted an old elementary school, 50,000 square foot building, into a Black business incubator where Black businesses there are growing and thriving at an incredible rate. We also purchased homes in Dixwell and Newhallville because we knew that folks who were not indigenous to those communities were coming in and land banking those homes, just waiting for people to lose their homes, grabbing their homes, and then letting them deteriorate. And so we started buying up properties. And we also have 6 food business lines. We just took over the Wallingford Country Club food services and beverage services, also the Cornell Scott Health Center. So we've created our own ecosystem as a way to, one, really implement economic infrastructure in Black communities, especially Dixwell and Newhallville, and capital formation in those communities, but also demonstrate to Black people what could be possible. You know, that the idea that, or the belief that Black folks are inferior, or even that white folks are superior, is a false. And quite frankly, the idea of a meritocracy is false as well. And so that's really what we've been doing. I know there's some folks who work with me, Phil Regur, who just started. Phil is right there, is our new president. Elaine Roper as well. Is there anyone ConnCAT and ConnCORP? Because I don't want to get people upset if I don't say their name too much. Yeah, so, you know, and quite frankly, everybody who works with me looks like me. And that was intentional.
Ron, I'm going to come to you in just a moment to talk a little bit about how students are talking about purpose. But very quickly, Erik, we started out by talking a little bit about calling. What called you to this work?
You know, great question, Stephanie. I grew up very poor. I grew up single parented. My dad had severe mental illness. He was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia at, I think he was 34 years old. I was 14. And I was always wondering who was going to come help us, because I knew I was poor, and I knew my mom was struggling, and my brother died of gun violence, and so it's just my sister and I and my mom. That's one thing. And so I always wanted to redeem my past. Secondly, and I said this in a conversation here a couple weeks ago, when I think about what, especially Dr. Martin Luther King and the Freedom Riders and Fannie Lou Hamer, Ella Baker, all these, especially civil rights heroes, and even before them, those who were enslaved people, black enslaved people, who were lynched, or even more horrible things done to these people who I'm from. Knowing what they have gone through, what they went through, I think about that all the time, and I don't want to let them down. There's not only a calling, but a commitment to ensure that I give it all that I have to liberate the minds and spirits of people who not only just look like me, but people who don't look like me, who don't have the courage of self-discovery. So,
Thank you for that
you're
answer.
welcome.
Ron, I want to ask you a little bit about what's on the mind of students graduating from SOM right now. The world is a very different place than it was even from when you entered the university. There was so much talk, particularly in the business world, about stakeholder capitalism, business with purpose. I know from where I sit as a business journalist and someone who oversees 2 titles that conversation seems to be diminishing. And I just wonder if you can talk a little bit about, one, your sense of purpose and mission as you walk out the doors and are about to enter the corporate world, and whether you think there is still a sense of optimism and that the students coming out of SOM do feel that sense of purpose.
I'll start with optimism. I feel like in conversations, when we get to the point that either this too shall pass or this administration has a term limit, the optimism ticks up a little bit, noticeably. But what's happening right now in conversations, and I've had a lot this week leading up to this, is that especially folks that came in with a strong sense of purpose for sustainability, for DEI, nonprofit work, education, these times are tough. And folks' livelihoods are at risk here. Many of us, not everyone, took out lots of loans to come here. And those are already accruing interest and kicking back. It's a lot. And so the conversations, that is in the back of folks' mind. And so a lot of folks are thinking, emotions are high. What do I do? Do I pivot the thing that brings in my income, the thing that I do from 9 to 5, and not make that who I am? And do I find time outside of my 9 to 5? Feels weird saying 9 to 5. I haven't worked a 9 to 5 in a while. And that's my wife. Like, it's probably my worst trait, right? Like, you gotta have time for family and all that. But what do you make your core identity? The thing that you do for a living? Or do you find time to do that outside? And do you build coalition around being on boards and pushing the work that way? And so a lot of folks here are fulfilling that mission currently through different groups like CARE, through nonprofit board fellows, through volunteer work, through donating what they can, through really promoting diverse entrepreneurs and folks that are carrying that work. But a lot of folks are starting to have to pivot because graduation is coming up again. And although there's a term limit on this administration and what's being cut and what's being told doesn't matter, we also have a term limit on when we need to start earning again, which is very difficult. And so obviously the emotions are high in these conversations. Obviously folks are thinking about, how do I remain true to my values? How do I remain true to the work that I want to do? But knowing that this might be a time, this might be a few years where I actually need to pivot the main thing. And that's really tough to see. It's tough to feel. For me, just personally, I had a 12-year career in public service prior to this, and so I'll be leaving here making that shift. And so I've kind of gotten lucky in this, that my service moving forward is through boards and through driving others who are going to be on the ground doing that work. But the commitment that I have to make and that others here really have to make is, how do we, who are not on the ground, convince people who have everything, financially, time-wise, to understand that it doesn't take a lot to write checks, to get involved, and to really understand the lived experience of those who have nothing. And I think that is where we can play the biggest role in making the same amount of change, even if we're not going to be able to go into functions and industries right now at the same clip that we thought we were going to. And so I think you just kind of have to frame the next 3 years, maybe a little bit after that. How can I still make impact, even if kind of like I'm not doing it and it's not my legacy in the next 3 years? That could become the legacy, actually.
Do you have any concerns or fears that even though this too shall pass and there is a term limit, that these next 3 years may change the culture and complexion of a place like the Yale School of Management, which versus other business schools has an emphasis on purpose, has an emphasis on nonprofit, has an emphasis on service? If over the course of the next 3 years, while people await perhaps a change in administration, there is a chilling effect on all of those things among the students or people who choose to come here?
I mean, the answer absolutely is yes. I think it's on, so institutions are obviously made of people, and it's people making the decisions as to where we're recruiting, who we're letting in, how we're supporting people through this. I think this absolutely could change the complexity. It could change the makeup of some classes. It could change the discussions that are going on in classes. Are we keeping focus on DEI, on equity and inclusion? Are we keeping the focus on sustainability, even if the job market might not be signaling that that's something viable to go into right now? And so I think the conversations can't stop. I think everything strategically still needs to happen at this institution as if the market were prime for all of that. And I think that, in connection with alumni staying together and really thinking about the role that we can play collectively, I think that helps us come out much stronger. But I do think we have to be realistic and understand and prepare that things are going to look a little bit different. And I think this isn't just at Yale as an institution. I think about the child credits for education that are about to happen in Texas, which is where I led that 400 districts through thinking about diverse recruitment of educators. And we led that through the frame of Black and brown children achieve better and believe more in themselves when they have educators who look like them. And if we're going to force Black and brown people or push them to go into education, we need to pay them better. Yeah. And so I think there's lots of conversations around that can be had. And that goes for every industry. Education is just my bread and butter. We can think about that in nonprofit service. We can think about that in small business support. We can think about it in ESG. And I think just because we won't be able to go into, just because the top of the market, the Fortune 500 companies might be cutting back in all of those areas, we still have folks that are going into just general consulting, finance, and other roles who need to think about, A, being really good contributors, because the more valuable you are to the company that you're working for, we know, it's just your word when you bring up things that don't look right, it means much more to people who either care but don't have a lot of time to think about that, or people who might not care and might have to pretend. But if you're a really valuable asset, if you're a contributor, and you do that, and then you think through the change that you can make through this next 3 years, I think that's another place that we can think about our energy and building coalition in that.
We're going to go to questions and comments from all of you in the community in just a few moments. The theme of this discussion is purpose and prosperity. Ron, I'm going to start with you. What does the word prosperity mean to you? What does prosperity look like for you and for your community?
Yeah. So I'm going to talk about prosperity on two levels here, and I'm going to finish with the one that's more important, or more urgent, more needed. So I think of like individual prosperity in thinking through, I as an individual do my best work when I feel comfortable and when I feel whole at home. And so what that means is continuing to drive a career that's going to give me meaning and purpose, but is going to elevate my ability to help organizations, especially those that I'm on the board of. Collectively, the work that I've done in education, the work that I've done with nonprofits and with students, I raced over here because I was tutoring students right before this. I had to show up, had to work with them. I'm going to see a few this weekend for some of our fundraising events too, which is great. But I think of that collective piece. I think really deeply about what Erik said before about folks wanting to work, and let's be frank, work at the bottom of Yale's staffing hierarchy, the lower paid jobs, and even some going up as opposed to going here. I think of graduating here, and another piece of that at Yale is being an inspiration for my students to think about they could actually apply here. They could actually get in, whether that's undergrad or some of the graduate programs. And I think if we can get the institution on this side, and if we can get the city and the community to think more prosperously about opportunities, and then people bridge that gap, that collectively, the students that I used to teach, the students that are in my programs and coming through Erik's programs, they're going to be able to be the ones leading the community in the future. And they're going to be the ones being able to tell their kids that everything is possible.
Erik, what does prosperity mean to you?
I think for me, and I'll answer this in the guise of Black people, because I'm Black. Prosperity means to dream. And I know so many people, actually too many people, who don't dream. And they don't dream because when they did, those dreams weren't facilitated. And those dreams became latent, and those latent dreams became rage. And so if one is thinking about prosperity, in my opinion, it is the idea of dreaming to be who it is that they want to be in this world. And this goes to your question before this one that Ron answered, that all that is happening, that is coming out of Washington, D.C., through the presidency and all these things, that Black people have been used to that. I've been used to that all my life. I've dealt with racist white people all my life. And so this, to me, is not a pivot at all. This is really the natural order of things. And so I've just been lucky enough and blessed enough to be able to dream and to have a vision and to have a hope because I believe hope is the seed of love, right? And so it is always for me about love. I've been blessed to be able to do that because I had people who, unbeknownst to me, ensured that my dreams would be facilitated, that the vision I had for my life and other people's life would actually manifest itself. Not everybody had that. And racism and systemic issues that are wrought from racism have just beat the dreams out of people. And so you're seeing a critical mass of Black people, especially, who are walking in this world, but not alive. And so prosperity to me is people who dream and somehow those dreams are facilitated. It has nothing to do with money to me. I've done well in life. And the more well I've done, the more I'm around people who have done way better than me. And so, it is not about money to me because you can never have enough.
Hope is the seed of love. I love that. I think we have mic runners. I would love to bring some of you into the conversation. If you have a question or a comment, feel free to raise your hand. No one asks a question. I have more. Got a lot more. Anna Blanding, come on. You've got something you want to say. Yes? I needed a ringer.
I'm going to deputize my son here, Daniel.
All right.
My name is Daniel Pilliner, in 8th grade, going to high school. And what's your advice for younger people or just people in general on how to find their purpose?
Go ahead, brother.
You want me to take that one?
Go ahead, man.
Love that.
I want to hear from both of you, so start thinking of your answers.
Was the question how to find your purpose? Was at the end of that?
Yeah.
Okay. Definitely lean on the people around you. That's the first thing I could say. You're going to need a support system for anything that you do, especially finding your purpose. And you're going to have to try a lot of different things and be comfortable being around folks that look just like you and comfortable being around folks that don't look like you, because you might find your purpose in a field where there aren't a lot of people who look like you. I also think that it's really critical to journal and get comfortable thinking about your thoughts. I think it's very easy to go through life and just be very task-oriented. I got to go to school today. I got to go to practice. I got to do chores, right? I'm thinking about your life there. And I would stop and just reflect on, like, what brings you the most joy in your days, in your weeks? Who are the people you want to be around? What do you notice that they're doing? And then just naturally just be curious and explore a lot of different things. Like, that's really what it is. You have to get exposed. And I know your mom not as well as Erik does, but I know she's going to help show you the world, and she's going to help guide you. But you're definitely going to want to, control that and just really ask a lot of questions and explore things, and tell people how you're feeling about it too. Talking with a lot of people, that's going to really help you.
Yes, Daniel. So Daniel came and shook my hand a little while ago, and he's taller than me now. Daniel, I felt like for me, when I knew my purpose, it was the very thing that I failed at all the time. And I would always come back to it. And I don't know what it was. It was something that I wanted to master about that thing. And I would come back after failing again. But I knew that I was getting close because I was feeling different about it every time I came back to it. And that ended up becoming my purpose. And so a lot of times, and I say this quite a bit, there's this kind of adage now about Black excellence. But before we can get to excellence, we have to get to mastery. And we don't talk about that enough. And to get to mastery, you have to fail. And so everything that I've done well in life, I've failed miserably. No one knows it, but I have. But I knew when I came back that this is, not only this is what I want to do, but this is who I want to be.
Anyone else in the audience? Yes, back here. Thank you. Can you tell us who you are?
Yes, Michelle Hatch, MBA 2024. I work for a large biotech company in San Francisco, and like all large tech companies in the Bay Area, about a month ago, after the executive order on diversity programs, corporate diversity programs, we were given 2 days to shut down all activities and formal programs, even remotely related to diversity or equity. And as you said, Erik, to dream is to prosper. Prosperity is to dream. I'm wondering what advice or thoughts do you have on how do we continue to dream and take action to create more equitable opportunities within larger companies in these times, other than just sitting back and waiting for 4 years?
Yeah. Me?
Yeah.
I think companies, especially enduring institutions, have to be courageous. What we're not seeing is the courage that you would usually hear prior to the election, which tells me that a lot of people who were speaking courageously probably voted for the wrong person. And so when institutions, again, especially enduring institutions, aren't encouraged, don't have courage or don't demonstrate courage, the people who work there choose not to do so as well. At some point, people have to say enough is enough. And institutions have to say enough is enough. And I dare say here, that Harvard did that. They said, we're not doing that, right? And so I think that is a salient model for other institutions like a biotech company or an academic institution like Yale University, right? That there is a model, there is a pattern right there of resistance. There has to be resistance, because if there is not, again, this has always been an issue for Black people. This has become a national issue because white folks are being affected. And so that at some point, people who don't look like me have to say enough. That's what it's really about. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, and I would just add from my perspective, as someone, again, who observes what a lot of these companies are doing, I think for employees who were recruited to institutions based on their purported commitment to some of these issues, now is a time, particularly if you are a graduate of an institution like SOM, to vote with your feet. I think we're seeing a lot of institutions that have a true North Star around equity and inclusion. They're not walking it back. It is those that never had that true North Star where you're starting to see that scrubbing of all references to diversity and inclusion. And so live by the sword, die by the sword. If you recruited young, smart people into your institution based on a promise of wanting to create a better world and a better environment, and you're walking back on those, I think employees are well within their rights to say, I'm going to go to a place that does care about these things. Yeah. Other thoughts? Other questions? I have a couple more questions for our panelists, and then I know there's a garden party awaiting us. This is a big one. What does moral courage look like in this moment?
I'll let you start.
You want me to start?
You can start.
Oh, my goodness. I think for me, it looks like being who I said I was going to be, doing what I said I was going to do, no matter what pain is inflicted upon me. Because for me, I answer to a higher power. And that higher power is my moral compass. It is the very thing that makes me make the decisions that I make every single day. And if I cannot look my 4 daughters in the eye when they ask me a question about what I did today, what decisions that I make today, that will ultimately, and when you're a so-called leader, an organizational leader especially, the decisions you make affect everybody who work with you. And that's a big burden to bear. And so again, I'm very prayerful, and I mean that. I'm very prayerful. I seek God's guidance every single day. And again, moral courage to me is ensuring that those 4 daughters of mine, who are grown women now, that I can look them in the eye. That's what it's all about for me.
Ron?
I think in this moment, and really historically, there's 3 things that we're fighting against. One is outright bigotry. Another is racism. And then there's just implicit biases. And I think I'll speak from the I and what I've seen. I think we spend more time fighting the implicit biases and some of the fights that we know we can win. And I think we need to recognize, especially in the wake of the last vote, that there's a lot more bigotry and racism out there than we believe. And I think unless we and the institutions that we represent and the coalitions that we create actually take that on as a challenge in the same way that Project 2025 or these other things have been created, and there's a clear intention of hate. There's a clear intention of making sure certain people don't thrive. If there isn't the same intention of absolutely taking that down, I don't know if my children and their children will be having these same conversations.
I'm sorry, Ron.
No, you're good.
Could I have a part 2? Because I was sitting here. Really quickly, I remember, we were having these community meetings, and I went to a meeting on my own, and it was, a group of, it was a lot of people, more people than I thought would be at this meeting, to be honest with you. And I was like, oh, Lord. And the meeting wasn't going well for me, right? And I was presenting our work, and was because there was a lot of, we had a lot of challenges in the communities that we chose to build in. And a lot of the challenges were because the people who were indigenous to Dixwell did not believe that these Black people had the money to do what we were doing, and didn't have really the agency to do what we were doing. And so that we were agents of Yale University who were being used to come and take up all the properties in Dixwell on behalf of Yale. And I was talking, and this later on, this woman came to me and talked to me about the way I was presenting to the community. And I thought that I was presenting very well to the community because I felt like we were coming with a lot of help. And we had this beautiful design. But what she made me realize was I was talking to the community in a way that I was letting them know that I'm not poor anymore. That the way I was talking to them was creating distance from them, and the language that I was using was creating more distance. And so I really thought about that. I mean, for a week, like painstakingly thinking, anyone who knows me, they know, like, I go inward. And I came up with the conclusion that she was right. that growing up in poverty had such a psychic pain and trauma on me that the way I was talking to people who I was assuming were in poverty was letting them know that I'm not like you, that you could be like me. And so moral courage is also looking at oneself and really deeply interrogating myself, and then hopefully draining all the things that are in me that are biased towards the people who even look like me. And so that was a tough lesson, but it was true.
Before I bring up the wonderful Zanaya Leon to close us out, I want to end with a question for both of the panelists and I want to credit Zanaya for this question. And I want us to try to end on an uplifting note. And so I'll ask each of you, oh, I'm sorry, there was another question. I apologize. Can we get a mic up at the back row there? So sorry about that.
Now, I left for a couple of minutes, so hopefully I'm not, if I am, I'm just being redundant and you can skip my question. But my issue is, I'm just wondering what we do, what kind of things can be done to make the people who attend the school more successful in all aspects of business, and other related areas. Because I think that, I'm a 1980 graduate of the school. Now I have the joint law and business degree, so I've been practicing law mostly. But I made efforts to do investment banking, and it was so racist that I couldn't break in. And I think that there are things that happen in the school in terms of not being as inclusive in activities and other kinds of things. Now, some of that maybe has changed, but I am wondering what kind of things can be done to ensure that minorities who attend the school are successful in whatever courses of action they choose to pursue.
Ron, maybe you can talk a little bit about, I think there's two parts to that question. One, what are some of the things that we can do to ensure that our underrepresented students are armed with success? But I also think implicit is, how do we make sure that the entire student body emerges from Yale with a mentality that is more inclusive, so that when they are encountering underrepresented peers in the workforce, they're not being racist?
Yeah. I think individually, what fosters that type of community is everyone understanding that not everyone, some people put on a face of happiness. So what you said about experiences back then, had a former classmate who shared that the experience here was actually 2 of the worst years of her life. And that, when I heard this, I balled up, because that was not my experience. But I think because folks that look like me or have darker skin than me or have lighter skin than me that are diverse can have good experiences, and we can be around folks, that can sometimes lead to the fact that everything's okay. And so for me, that makes me look inward. You were just talking about looking inward about folks in the community. That makes me think, and I'm leaving here with a lot of optimism. I think that's where you were going next. I'm leaving here with good relationships. I'm leaving here thinking about impact and thinking about how to carry this forward and what we as classmates can do. But that makes me think that I didn't do enough to check on people. That makes me, given someone who was running an organization while being a student here, knowing that I didn't have a lot of time and my calendar is packed, But that means that the value was on my organization, on me, on classes, and then I put behind that checking on people to make sure that everyone was okay. And so if I could go back, that's what I would change. I would have checked on more people. And so I think if everybody takes that frame, no matter where you are, currently in business school, currently in the workforce, and you just take more time to put business aside for a second and check on people and allow other people to check on people, that makes it so not the side of us succeeding academically and all that, but the other part of your question, I think that takes care of it. If we know that people are suffering, I believe that 95% of people that come through these doors, the admissions office does a really good job, that kindness is a thing that they absolutely value. I just think people get caught in their own lives sometimes and get caught on the things that they have prioritized, and they forget about people who aren't having the same experience, and they forget that maybe they're causing that.
We have just a few minutes left. I did want to get to my question about optimism because I do want us to leave the room with a little bit of spring in our step. Erik, what makes you optimistic in these times?
I'm all about hope. I really am. I've never not been optimistic, just given the way I had to grow up and survive. A lot of folks, especially corporate people, I find it so interesting that they say, Erik, hope is not a plan. And I say it is when that's all you have. So for me, I've never not been optimistic, Stephanie. The fact that I'm on a platform giving voice to the very things that I care about gives me hope. If I can wake up in the morning, I have a shot. I have a shot to do better what I didn't do good the day before. And I think we should all think like that.
Ron?
My optimism comes from my family. It comes from my friends here, the classmates who every time we see each other, whether it's been class that we got out of before, or whether it's been a couple weeks, whether it's been months, the fact that I have a support system and I know others have support systems here that are built on love, built on trust, that I think people can continue to bring that out into the world. And despite everything that's going on politically, despite everything that's going on economically, I think we can continue to lead with that. And so I think that the more that I lead with love, the more that others lead with love and hope and dreaming. Erik, you spoke to me. I'm a dreamer. Yeah. That's what I do. That really, really spoke to me. And it's the fact that some of my dreams have come true, right? That allows me to continue doing that. It's the fact that I can love and be loved that makes me continue to do that, right? And I think for some people who, don't always have that, how do we seek that out? Like in our organization, we have a thing where no kid ever sits alone.
Yeah.
Adults can sit alone, but no kid ever sits alone. So if you're an intern, if you're a volunteer, if you're a staff, you do not let anybody sit alone. Wow. Unless they physically remove you from being near them, they don't sit alone. So that's what keeps me optimistic, knowing that despite everything that's going on, we can still love and be loved.
Erik Clemons, Ron Coleman, thank you so much for
Stephanie.
your comments, for your wisdom.